Hello, everybody. Welcome to MHTV. Really pleased to have you with us tonight. We're going to be talking about late diagnosis of autism. And before we get started, let's go to Dave so that he can tell you how to join in and share your thoughts with us tonight. Dave?
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Nicky. Yeah, it's great to be here again. And obviously looking forward to people joining in the conversation tonight. There's a couple of really easy ways people can do it. The first is just to the right where you're watching the picture on Facebook Live. There's a Facebook Live chat. Just put in your comments, questions, any thoughts, and obviously we'll feed in as many as we can tonight. The other option you've got is if you're on Twitter, all you need to do is use the hashtag MHTV. I'll be looking for that and I'll be able to see any tweets that mention it and we'll be able to bring them in as well. But without further ado, straight back to you, Nicky.
Okay, so today our fantastic guest is Victoria, who's been giving us a personal and a professional perspective. So Victoria, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
So my name is Victoria. I am in my day-to-day life, I'm the head of mental health and learning disability nursing at the University of Derby. And I am a mental health nurse, registered mental health nurse, although I don't work clinically anymore. And I also was diagnosed with autism in my, I've forgotten the exact age now, but in my kind of mid to late 30s, so a few years ago.
So when we're talking about sort of autism and late diagnosis, what exactly are we talking about?
So I think the idea, the late diagnosis bit is quite interesting. I think what it tends to be used as is shorthand for not diagnosed as a child.
Yeah.
Certainly in my mid 30s, I didn't think of myself as particularly late in my life. No, really. And I know that I'm in a few kind of groups and networks and things, and there's people sort of in their 60s and 70s and beyond, being diagnosed, particularly women. So I think it's quite a broad term, but yeah, it's that not at school, not as a child diagnosis, I think.
And why does it happen so late for people, do you think?
So I think certainly when I was a child, back in the 80s and the 90s, autism in women and girls wasn't really considered a thing that happened, that existed.
Yeah.
And if it was usually, people who had quite significant additional needs, required a high level of support, not people who maybe were able to function to a degree and attend, normal school and all those sorts of things. So I think, and obviously over the last, probably really over about the last 10 years or so, there's been a big shift in understanding, and there continues to be a lot of work. It's a really hot area at the moment, and this recognition that actually women and girls can also be autistic, and they present often in a different way to men and boys, and those kind of traditional and stereotypical, if you like, autistic traits that people would often talk about.
How would you say that they're different?
So I think you've got things like so for boys, often there's the really stereotypical one is like they're obsessed with trains or get fixed on something like that. And with women, I've certainly seen some research that suggests it's often different. So boys, it's often like vehicles and those sorts of things. Girls, it's often stuff like animals or things that are just seen as a bit more socially acceptable, I suppose. Okay. And don't kind of seem as perhaps as odd, for want of a better term. And I think as well, there's obviously all the stuff around women and girls being quite adept at masking. So it's that ability to sort of act in a way that appears neurotypical, if you like, and kind of literally put on that mask and behave in a societally acceptable, appropriate way, which seems to be a female specific thing.
Well, we're rewarded for it, aren't we? That kind of
Yeah,
positive, non-combative behaviour, you get it
that's
rewarded
it.
very early on.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
you know, the things that you can do to be quiet.
Yes, exactly. It's that. It's
Even
being
if you
quiet,
don't,
being yes, being, you know, fading into the background, not creating a fuss, not doing anything wrong. So it's, yeah, you learn that quite quickly. And certainly when I was at school, I learned quite early to stop being myself and behaving in certain ways, because it would get me into lots of trouble. And so the best thing to do was just to be very quiet and to do what I was told as much as possible, and hide away, basically.
And most of the people who get diagnosed sort of like after the sort of later period of their life, or mid to later period, are they mostly women at that stage, or are there times when men are diagnosed much later as well?
I don't know the statistics, and certainly I suppose my own sort of interest and echo chamber leads me to lots of women, late diagnosed women. Those are a lot of the groups I'm involved in. It's kind of the research I tend to notice and think, oh, I'll have a read of that and all the rest of it. That's not to say that there aren't men, and certainly from my links with that I do still have with clinical practice, I know that there are lots of men out in mental health services who've maybe not been diagnosed, and maybe have comorbid mental health issues, either alongside or as a result of autism, and also things like ADHD, that have perhaps been masked by other things. So I think certainly men have been more likely to be diagnosed historically, or boys diagnosed earlier, but that's not to say that there aren't people who've kind of reached their adulthood and haven't had the right sort of pathways and treatment and everything.
Can you tell us a little bit more about your journey, how it happened for you?
So as I kind of said, I was always a bit weird at school. I grew up somewhere, grew up down south in quite a rural village, but within the commute belt to London, so it's a bit of a weird place to live, actually. So we were quite isolated, and I think I always just assumed it was because I was isolated, and I do have a sister, but I was nearly 7 when she was born, so for a long time I think of myself as an only child. And then by the time she came along, there's a big age gap. So my schooling was quite difficult, always found it difficult to make friends, to kind of understand those social connections. I didn't have the language to explain that then. I always did okay at school academically. One of the things that I have is hyperlexia, so I could always read. I don't remember there being a time where I couldn't read. I went to school, age 5, able to read novels, and it was quite a shock when I discovered that that's not a thing for everybody, and I had to teach my own children to read, not realizing that it's not an innate thing. And basically throughout, kind of particularly when I got to secondary school, things got really difficult for me, and I had lots of mental health problems, lots of kind of anxiety and depression. It was labelled as self-harm, lots of things going on there. And looking back, I can understand that was because I was struggling to fit and to find, to work out where I should be in society and in social groups. But it went on. I went to university, and continued to kind of struggle and have different problems. It was always, whenever I did see professionals though, it was always put down as anxiety, depression, that sort of thing. I've had bits and pieces of counselling and antidepressants and stuff. They're never really, well, I always found them very difficult, the antidepressants, quite sensitive to that sort of stuff. And I didn't like the way it made me feel.
It's still very young at this stage, I would say.
So this is sort of like early 20s. but kind of muddled through like you do.
Yeah.
I did my degree, then worked for a bit, and then I worked with people with what was called then autism and challenging behaviour. Actually, this is, I don't think we'd use that term anymore, unfortunately. But then I went and did my nurse training to be a mental health nurse. Lots and lots of people who go into mental health nursing have their own lived experience, so no different there. Again, trying to kind of make sense of things as well as wanting to help people who had similar experiences. And you know, it kind of all that period, it was still up and down and very, you know, there were periods that were okay, but also periods that were really, really difficult with my own mental health. And then as I kind of went into my late 20s, I met my now husband, and we had some kids. And it was really, we had 3 children, all under 5 at one point, which I do not recommend.
Yep.
So perhaps, you know, unsurprisingly, that was a very difficult time. And it was really, with my 3rd child, I really went, you know, was really struggling with my mental health. Went to the GP, and I said, I was like, I don't know what this is. I think it's personality disorder is where it fits actually with what was going on. So I got sent to for diagnosis, you know, for review, and got diagnosed with personality disorder, borderline personality disorder. Got sent to a group, which was one of the worst things I've ever had to do. So that sort of, now knowing what I know, that sort of group, the sort of DBT, CBT type approach, was just horrendous. Being a mental health nurse alongside all this, I absolutely didn't want to be seen as being non-compliant, and have that written on my record. So I dutifully went to these groups, and was just so pleased when they were over. And I always remember they gave me, so one of the things they gave us was an emotion wheel. So I don't know if people have ever seen that, you can just Google it, there's lots of them on there. And I always remember them giving us these, they printed them out and, you know, presented them all to us, and they were like, help you name what you're feeling and all this stuff. I just remember looking at it, being absolutely horrified at all these emotions I was supposed to be able to feel. I was like, surely you don't need all of them. You just need like, all right, not all right, you know. And it was very bright and colourful. And that's
should have let you draw your own, and you'd have just done it in 4s.
You just need 2, really.
Like an on-off. Okay, not. I like that.
And then again, that's good black and white.
More of an emotion stick than an emotion wheel, though, I think.
Yes, an emotion stick. That's it. I'm going to have an emotion stick. I mean, and yeah, when I look at it now, I'm like, oh yeah, there was a sign. But basically, I went all through this, and I didn't really get any better. You know, nothing. And I did do, you know, I did all the things that they're telling me to do, and I still felt awful. And I was at a point where I felt like there was something intrinsically wrong with me, like fundamentally wrong, fundamentally missing. And I'd kind of talk about not feeling like I was a real person, like not a complete person, and whatever it was that everyone else in society, because obviously when you're like that, everyone else is great and it's just you. Whatever everyone else was able to do to live normal, happy, functional lives, I just couldn't do it, and because there was something fundamentally wrong. And I was really stuck in that, and there wasn't really any more help at this point. For, you know, I've been discharged because I've been to my group. So you have to go away and put it into practice. That's what I tell you. So I spent a lot of time on the internet just trying to make sense of how I was feeling, and just eventually stumbled into women and autism sort of discussions, women and borderline personality disorder and the crossover with autism. So it was all from that, from the internet and my own sort of research and people's experiences that I'd kind of discovered out there, that I ended up going down that route. And the more I read, the more I was like, initially I was like, oh, I don't think this works. But then the more I kind of understood it, and the more I sort of thought about my own kind of life and experiences, and it was like, actually, this all makes a lot of sense. And then, you know, went to my GP after a bit with all of my arguments prepared, not really thinking, oh yeah, it's a GP appointment, I'll have like 2 minutes. And he was, I didn't have a problem, he was very good. He was like, why do you want a diagnosis? And I said, well, because of some of the problems I've had, and kind of the validation for me, and also gives you protection under kind of, you know, protected characteristics.
We'll come back to that.
Yes. So he referred me. I did have a bit of a wait. I had about a 2-year wait, by which point I'd done so much of my own research and learning that I was at the point where I was like, well, if they don't diagnose me, then they are absolutely wrong. And I'll cross that bridge. And I went through the process, and yeah, it was pretty quick once I was in. You know, it's a couple. We did the assessments, and at the end of the second assessment, she's like, "Yeah, I can tell you today that you do have autism, and you do meet the criteria for it." So, and it was hugely validating, and also at that point, like I said, I'd already done a lot of the working through, you know, reviewing my life and thinking about lots and lots of things. So I was just like, oh, excellent. I can just get on with things now, and it's all okay. And I can say, well, I can't do this, or I can't do that very well, or I struggle with this because I'm autistic. And that's great. And it has, ever since then, it's been so much better. And almost, you know, my mental health has never been so good. Yeah. So it's been such a positive experience. A long way getting there, and a lot of my own work to get there. But absolutely, yeah, made a huge difference in the end. So yes, it's a bit of a long meandering story, but
no, it's really interesting. It's got so many questions now. I guess one of the things is there anything, do you think, a point in which services should or could have caught it? Because it's almost like there's a list of women's illnesses you're allowed to have, and they just allocated them to you at different points of your life.
Yeah, I think I've thought about it a lot. I've thought about it a lot as my, you know, having been a mental health person, you know, nurse myself out there assessing people, and the way you are taught as a mental health professional to assess people is so geared towards which of these mental illnesses do you have. There is nothing, you know, within the standard assessment that we would do, the mental state examination, you don't consider things like that would fall into neurodiversity. So it's just missed completely.
A lot better, haven't we?
Yeah. And I think that, so they if the right questions had been asked when I was about 16 or 17 the first time I went to a GP with kind of problems. And yeah, if the right questions had been asked then, they could have, I don't know, they would have diagnosed me right away, but I could have been sent on a very different path.
What questions should people have asked?
Well, I think it's, like I say, it's rather than focusing on those mental state examination questions about, you know, how are you feeling, you know, and have you got thoughts of harming yourself, are you doing this, you're hearing voices, seeing anything, all that sort of stuff. I think it's some of those things around the social side of things. You know, do you struggle in social environments? Do you have sensory issues? And I'm not saying you need to also do a full like autism or ADHD or whatever assessment, but I think there is space for some of that within. We're so, in mental health, we're so fixed on mental state examination. I think it excludes other things. And we talk about like diagnostic overshadowing, where people have a physical health problem that because you're looking for, you know, mental health, it's you put those symptoms down to mental ill health. And it's the same thing, isn't it? It's missing it because you're looking for certain mental illnesses or diagnoses. So yeah, I think it's more of the consideration to the social things rather than just do you live with somebody who can look after you if you need it, you know, which is what it tends to be.
It's such a strange thing, isn't it? 'Cause on one hand, it's almost like not fitting into society shouldn't be an illness, should it? Like, because our society is so messed up. If you do fit into it, you've got to ask yourself some serious questions. And also, like, what young person doesn't feel weird compared to everybody else? Like, everybody feels weird, don't they?
Yes.
And it's such a hard thing for you, particularly as you were saying, you didn't have anything else particularly to compare it to know what your experience was.
And
how it was different.
And certainly the other thing, looking back now, my mum, she died. She's been dead for about 11 years now. So she died before I even went through the diagnosis. But looking back now, I think to myself, I'm pretty sure my mum was on the autism spectrum. She was an odd lady. She really struggled with social things. She had some very fixed ideas and beliefs about stuff. And I think that's the other thing. So you obviously only know what you live in, and if that's the norm for you, you perhaps don't see it. So it is very difficult.
What was the hardest of the what sort of issues are hardest for you, and is there anything that's surprisingly much easier for you than for other people? I mean, you mentioned your reading skills being
I think so I'm really good at now I work in quite an operational type role because I work as a manager and all the rest of it, and I'm really good at taking in lots of information and picking out the bits that matter. I'm good at like big picture stuff, but I can also get quite fixed on certain things. I think the difficult things for me are some of the things that you're expected to do, like networking and that sort of having contacts and doing all those sorts of things. Because it's not even that it doesn't come naturally. I don't even think about it. I just think, well, I'm doing my thing, so and if somebody needs me, then they'll come and find me, won't they? They'll come and get me, or and certainly when I've been at conferences and stuff, and people start talking to me and doing all the small talky stuff, and I just say, well, I don't care. I just don't care. Why have we got to have this conversation?
I was sitting here quietly with my thoughts, and now that you're here,
I was all
telling me where you live, I don't care. I don't know you.
Or the weather, or all those things that we do, and I don't really get it.
Have you got yourself a nice badge that says, don't do that to me?
I have talked before about like having like a bit of paper I could just have, a brief thing.
You used to have them in COVID, didn't you? So like, I'm not a hugger kind of things.
Yes. Well, see, COVID was in many ways terrible. I don't want to downplay it, but other parts of it were just great. I mean, my life in some ways barely changed because I was at home hanging out with my family who I they're tolerable.
High praise indeed.
And suddenly I didn't have to go anywhere or do all the things I didn't want to do. So I could just go for nice walks in the countryside with the dogs. It's like, that's great. And no one was allowed to touch me, which is brilliant. Fortunately, where I work, I mean, I'm obviously very open about it. Also,
people know you.
That's it. And we'll joke about it.
But there is something about this kind of like the expectations that are placed on you in conferences, in like breakout warm-up exercises. I mean, nobody likes having to make towers of marshmallows and chopsticks anyway, but there are people for whom it's a particular torture, I think.
Yes, it's funny you should say that, because we were planning our team away day today, and I said, do we want to build a raft or build a tower that you drop an egg from or something? Obviously, nobody did, because we all know that that's awful.
I was once in a group where I was the one in charge of tying the ropes, and we sank really quickly. That's been one of my particular. But I was never like a brownie or anything, I didn't know how to tie ropes. I don't think we double knotted them. We only made it like 50 yards. We were the first ones down. Luckily, we were all strong swimmers, but
there you go.
It was a particular hellscape for me. But I fear we're digressing.
But it is, it's all these things that people, it's stuff as well where people go, oh, it'll be fun. And I'm like, in what way is this fun? Fun is like being at home with a book. That's fun, not having enforced social time with people I don't know very well.
It's interesting, isn't it? That kind of one of the things that's really changed for us is this expectation of emotional labor at work, like to be friends at work. And whenever you work somewhere, people, we're just like a big family. So, but we're not, are we? We're here to get our money and do a good job and then to go home.
Yeah.
You know, there's not, it's that extorting extra work out of people by making them feel like you care about them is not nice behavior. And it's something that I think pre-pandemic I didn't really notice, whereas now I do notice it, and it doesn't wash in the same way I think that it would have done.
It doesn't wash in the same way. What's interesting is then, to be fair, there are a whole group of people who really miss that, and it was really important to them for other reasons. So,
but I mean, you can care about people and grow a real relationship.
Yes,
that's not, and that can happen anywhere, at work, anything. But there's something about that kind of like false intimacy that's pressed on you in order to make you feel obligated. That happens a lot in corporate world, which is not really acceptable. If you want extra work out, people pay them extra money.
Yeah. Unfortunately, see now, because I've got a diagnosis, I've got a letter from my doctor that says I don't have to do those things. As I tell my manager quite often.
I'm very surprised to see that it's not printed behind you.
Yeah,
on the wall. I'm
t-shirt.
disappointed. Like a poster. It's very important to let people know.
Yeah, so no, and I literally got a letter a short time after diagnosis, and it basically says Victoria has autism and shouldn't be made to do anything she doesn't want to do. I said, this is brilliant. I'm going to put this on everything.
I feel there's a stamp going on the bottom of the emails. Yeah. So that kind of takes us kind of into the world of work really neatly there, doesn't it? So, you know, you seem to be describing, you know, work environment's actually quite supportive of you.
Yes, yeah.
And that's not the case for everybody. And I guess it's quite useful for us to know and just to think about, you know, how best can people be supportive, but also maybe think a little bit about managing self-disclosure and what you might need to think about with that. Yeah,
so I kind of alluded to the fact that one of the reasons I went for diagnosis was about protection, kind of under Equalities Act, and at work. So before my job before this was a very different experience. Now, to be fair, I didn't have a diagnosis of autism, but at that point I did have a diagnosis of borderline personality disorder.
Which is a very different badge to be carrying.
Which is I'm acutely aware of the difference there. And I actually never disclosed that to my manager because I'd heard him talk about people with PD. So I never disclosed. I did talk to HR and occupational health, who were very supportive in a different way. But I had an absolutely horrendous time in that job. Very much, I mean, at the time I was not very well. And that was at the point where I thought there's something wrong with me and all the rest of it. So, but looking back now, really it's almost constructive dismissal what happened. And so when I went through this, where I work now, I made the decision quite early that actually I was going to tell my manager I was going for this diagnosis. Be very open about it, see what the responses were that I got, because I wasn't going through it again. I wasn't going through the difficulties. Generally, everybody at work has always been really supportive. The most I've had is sort of a bit of surprise initially, because obviously I'm articulate, I'm in a good job and have a career and I'm able to function reasonably well some of the time. So that's the most that I've had. And then, you know, like I say, because I think I've been very open, and I work with mental health nurses primarily. My team is almost all mental health nurses, and everybody else I work with is healthcare professionals in kind of our college. So there is a lot of empathy and understanding and compassion there. And I think academia is a different environment to healthcare. There's certainly not a place without its pressures, but it's different pressures and different things. So I think I made a very conscious decision to be open and to disclose, because I didn't want to. I didn't want to carry it around like a secret, and to then have to tell, have to tell somebody at some point, and for it to be a problem. I wanted to know from the word go what sort of reception I was going to have. Now that's about me and where I work and the people I work with, and the industry that I work in. Not everywhere is going to be like that. Not everybody has that baseline of professional knowledge and understanding. Not everybody has kind of such robust equality training and all the rest of it that goes along. Not everywhere would encourage discussion the same way that obviously academia does too. So I think there are some places, it's something for people to think about very carefully about what's right for them. And I suppose I did sort of test it first with close friends, and I didn't put a massive Facebook post out there or anything. And I told people gradually over time as I was going through the process and as it came up, really. And then it's kind of turned into more of a thing, because obviously I decided to write an article about it and got it published, and then so
it's a difficult thing to think about, isn't it? Because obviously your own experience has been sort of so polar opposites of each other, and I think it's hard to tell if part of that is the diagnosis that you were carrying, because I think that someone's mental distress or someone's diagnosis is an entirely personal thing, but it becomes an entirely public thing as well, doesn't it? You can't have half a secret. You can't just tell one person at work. That's very unlikely to be something that will happen. And you can try and introduce something slowly, but that's not how work environments happen. They're like, particularly if it's a secret, you've asked someone to keep it quiet. So
absolutely,
you have to be really ready, don't you, I think, to be public with information about your health if you go that way.
Yes. And I can't really, I remember telling my manager. I've had a couple of different managers. I can remember telling sort of those people. I think I'd had kind of conversations with colleagues that I was closer to, or am closer to, and then I've never really just sort of announced it, but it's definitely common knowledge among people now. But I knew once I told one person at work, certainly, that I was basically I needed to do that, assuming that would mean everybody will know.
That's a point.
And that's fine.
Be ready.
That was my choice with it all. And I think I because I'm a manager, I'm directly kind of responsible for other people, and I'm really keen to role model and to sort of show that it's okay, and we can be fallible and we can have other things going on, and that's okay. We can still do our jobs and come to work and do things.
Because that is not the message that I think probably you and I both got when we were training at all. Not really.
Absolutely not. You do not talk about any of your own problems ever. And I'm not necessarily talking about to people that you're caring for. I think that's a different conversation about how you self-disclose to people that you're working with in a professional capacity. But there's still that massive stigma. I still interview prospective student nurses who will, at the end of the interview, say to me, "Oh, I didn't know whether to say anything, but I've had my own issues, and is that can I still come on the course?" And and you have discussions about, well, yes, of course it's fine. It's about what's right for you and all the rest of it, but still massive anxiety and stigma around these things.
And not completely clear, I think, from practice areas yet.
No,
much better.
Still
can be difficult. So for anyone who's self-disclosing, be really sure that that's what you want to do. Have thought it through. Be in a union,
Yes, yeah, and I think that's sound advice, definitely. Yeah, and
Because you mentioned before about the importance of the Equality Act for you. So could you tell us a little bit about that as well?
I think this is probably because I'm autistic. I like a rule and a regulation. So I was very well. If I've got it in black and white, that gives me that protection. And I suppose because I was in a better place, you know, mental health wise, I was thinking, well, actually, I'd be able to argue this time and to fight and to justify and to explain. I've never had to. You know, like I say, everything's been absolutely fine. But I think for me, it was that legal protection was really important. And who knows, it still might be in the future. You never know what might come up, or you know what might happen. So yeah, it was just I think having that in black and white, really, that I've got some protection, and nobody could say, well, because of the way that you are, you can't do your job, or something like that. Yeah,
it is really important to know what your rights are. And the thing as well that's sticking with me when you were talking about getting your diagnosis, the fact that you were a qualified professional, digitally literate, able to understand something is wrong, I can do something about it. I mean, you know, what about somebody who doesn't have those skills? How on earth do they find their way through that maze?
Well, I've thought this a lot, and like I say, I'm in a few kind of like Facebook groups and stuff with people going through, and you just with women, it's like late diagnosed women with autism, and the groups all accept people who are self-diagnosed or going through the process as well. You don't have to have a formal one, and there are like every day there's people on there going, I've been to my GP or I've been to this and they've said no, and I mean, you can't get involved with every single thing, but I do. There's so many that I read, and I think, well, if you just, it's because you've said this that they've dismissed you. It's like, oh, there's one off the waiting list, or it's because you've done that. And absolutely, I'm articulate. I know how the NHS works. I know how to manage the system and how to negotiate the different pathways. Anybody without that level of knowledge and understanding, really, it's amazing anybody gets referred and manages to negotiate it. And I'm also, you know, you get given the AQ 50, so that's a problematic
Can you say what that
measure.
Is listening?
Sorry?
Can you say what that is for people who perhaps don't know?
Oh, sorry, yeah. The autism, what is it? Autism question, it's a questionnaire of 50 questions to decide whether you are probably on the, well, it's whether you go for a further assessment or not. So I can't remember what the scores are, but if you score within an upper range, then it's indicative of referral for further assessment. But they're quite geared around traditional understanding and ideas of male presentations of autism. So when I got sent that, I'm quite happy to kind of write all over it, going, well, hang on, but this, or to kind of interpret it, because I work with data a lot. Other people, of course, aren't going to do that. They think they're going to look at it and go, oh, well, no, I don't do any of those things. So, especially if you're autistic and you're quite rigid in your thoughts.
Yes, no.
So, no, I think, I know there is quite a lot of research and work going on out there in different places at the moment about looking at autism in women and about different measures and ways of assessing and making it more holistic rather than male centered. Are
there any resources that, because I can, where we're getting towards the end of me, still haven't spoken to Dave at all tonight. Sorry. I have been on WhatsApp, see if he wants to say anything. It's fine. I'm not just ignoring him. But can you talk us through any resources that maybe are out there, or things that will be helpful for anyone, you know, who wants to understand perhaps themselves more, ask questions, or see how they can help? What could people be looking at?
Yeah. So for people who are nurses, registered nurses, the RCN has a really good range of resources that only came out a year or two ago. So they're on their website somewhere, and they have resources for working as somebody with, I think it might be neurodiversity rather than autism specifically that they cover. Working with people, there's like information for managers as well on there from what I remember. They've got a really good range of stuff, and I know when I read it I thought, oh yeah, this is helpful and sensible, and probably of use to people. You've got places like the National Autistic Society that's always good for, you know, a general understanding, and they do have pages about autism in women and girls. And same with the NHS as well. So they're you know, nothing radical, but they're good starting points for if you want to kind of know more. And then you can move into the depths of Google.
At your peril.
At your peril, yes.
So, Dave, hello. Is there anything you wanted to say? Because we're coming to the end now.
It's been a really interesting sort of conversation to listen into, so I'm quite happy not to have been interjecting too often tonight. I've obviously been tweeting some of the links that Victoria shared with us before the episode, and some of the things that she's shared, you know, during it tonight. And I suppose it's just really interesting to hear. I suppose one of the questions that I had in my head was, how much do you think it would have been different if you'd have got a diagnosis much more early? How do you feel like it's kind of affected your life trajectory?
So, I mean, it obviously has, but I guess I wouldn't be literally here, would I? So I think I'm always quite reluctant to look back at, well, what could have been, because that's been and gone, and this is where we are. So I just sort of think about, okay, well, and I suppose actually that 2-year period where I was on the waiting list is where I dealt with all of that and kind of got over it. And you just have to let it go, don't you? Well, you know, it is what it is. So, yeah.
And I suppose, you know, from my understanding, sort of diagnosis for autism on the NHS can be quite a slow process. So, you know, was there anything that you ever thought about sort of trying to go private to speed up or not?
I did consider it. So I thought about it, but I think I didn't have any, by the time I'd gone for the, you know, to be referred, I'd done so much research that I was pretty certain. And I had talked to people at work, you know, I had talked to managers and people at work and friends and that. So I felt quite safe to wait, to just wait for that time and for it to happen. And I knew it was a 2-year waiting list, so that's okay. You know, I'd kind of mentally budgeted for that, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I know, you know, I think where there is, sometimes people need it, don't they? I'm not, you know, I wasn't applying for PIP, for, you know, for any sort of disability benefits or anything like that. So it's slightly different, you know, to people who've got an absolute, more of a desperate or a timely need for it. And it's an issue, isn't it, that you have to wait for so long on the NHS for a lot of people.
It is. Is there one thing that people could sort of like take away and that would change things, or that would really help, do you think?
Oh, I don't. One thing. No, I think it's just about. I think it's just about kind of being open to those conversations. You know, listening, hearing what people are telling you. You know, if you've got somebody who is saying, "Oh, I think I might be autistic," or any sort of neurodiversity, really hearing that, and rather than sort of going, "Oh, don't be so silly," or "Oh, well, you can't be autistic," or "We're all a bit autistic." That's the other one, isn't it? Of course, that people love to throw out there. And I'm like at the point now where I'm like, well, actually, no, I've prepared a short PowerPoint presentation about why you're wrong on that.
Please send it. We'll tweet it out. Also, I think you really do prove on like a double loop on why that's not the case.
Yeah.
I love it. It's only proof, but it's actual proof.
Yeah. I mean, yeah,
But why do people
that's what
try
I
and do
would
that?
say. Yeah.
They don't say, "Oh, everyone has a bit of cancer," do they? No, everyone has.
No, exactly.
Such a
No,
weird thing to say.
we're all on the cancer spectrum.
Particularly when someone is telling you, this is something about me that you need to
Yeah.
know. And then someone else goes, that's not special.
Yeah,
Why?
exactly.
I don't get it.
Yeah. I think that's probably the most important thing.
I've really, really enjoyed talking with you. And I have to say, it's just so impressive that you're able to just take a step back from it as well, because it must have had some very overwhelming times, and actually just use it as something to learn from and actually be around for other people to see. If you're trying to be a role model, you're doing a really good job.
Well, that's the benefit of only having two emotions, you see.
And on that note, Dave, was there anything that you wanted to add, by the way, before we finish up? Any last thoughts?
I do want to say that obviously, you know, we're normally a weekly publication, MHTV, but there's going to be an extra special episode tomorrow from Cardiff because it's the 2023 Skellen Lecture, which is being done at Cardiff
Mental
University
Health
this
Oscars,
year.
everybody, the Mental Health Oscars.
Absolutely. And I'm looking forward to being there in person. But for anyone that can't make the trip down to Cardiff, we're going to be sharing a live stream on the MHNA YouTube page. So when we're running the credits, there's going to be a QR code. So if you want to join in with that tomorrow, you can scan that QR code and it'll take you to the page. And then the other thing to say is next week, we're going to be joined by Dr. Emily Setti, who is going to be talking about misogyny, masculinity, and well-being. So I think we're, due another excellent episode next week as well.
Thank you very much for your time, everyone, today. Really enjoyed that. And thanks again to our brilliant guest. Thanks, Victoria. Good night, all. Good night, guys.
Bye.